recently changed, and we wanted to give you updated information about what those changes mean and what you can be doing to assist your community members access the resources available. So a reminder that we also have a webinar next Tuesday, December 13th at 3 on the Digital Inclusion Leadership Awards. That is open to all cities and counties, not just our members. But we are encouraging cities and counties to apply for recognition for any existing program or emerging program to create digital equity. You can learn more on our site under awards, or if you want more information, please email me directly at deb@nextcenturycities.org. A few housekeeping details. We will keep everyone on mute except for the presenters so that we can reduce the impact of the ambient noise. But if you have questions, and we hope you will, please put them in the chat box located on the bottom right of your screen. You can either send them to everyone or you can send them just to the organizers, but we'll be sure to address them during the call. We are recording the webinar, and it will be shared on our resource page should you want to refer back to it or share it with others. So let's get going. Chris Mitchell will be moderating the conversation, and I'm going to turn it over to him to introduce our panelists.
Thank you, Deb. We are going to start with a short background of the Lifeline program to make sure that everyone's up to speed with where it came from, where it is, and where it's going. We have two wonderful presenters to do that. After they do this short presentation that they're going to tag team to inform us, they will then be more of a discussion format, and we'll be answering questions, including from the audience. So we're going to have Jamie Gustafson, who is going to be starting off with the slideshow. She's the Director of Stakeholder Management for the Lifeline program at USAC. And we also will have Olivia Wine, who will be joining as well, and she's the attorney for National Consumer Law Center. And this should be really good. Both of them are not only very knowledgeable, but very interesting, which is something we always look for in these presentations. So, Jamie, please kick it off.
Great, thanks so much. So thank you guys for the opportunity to talk to you today about the Lifeline program. Really excited to be with you. So we'll just, I think, jump to the next slide and talk a little bit about the mandate of USAC, and it's very simple. It's everyone connected. And so the Universal Service Administrative Company, which is a mouthful, which is why we frequently go by USAC, is an independent nonprofit designated by the FCC. So we're the permanent administrator of the Universal Service Fund. So if you look at your phone bill each month and see that line item for the Universal Service Fund, that money comes to the programs that we support. So we work closely as a partner with the FCC to protect the integrity of universal service by informing and educating our audiences. We collect and distribute contributions, and we work with the service providers to really promote program compliance. So just a little bit about our mission. We are here to ensure that all people in the United States have access to quality, affordable connectivity services. And by that we mean both broadband and telephone services. And we do that through 4 service programs. The first you may be familiar with is the Connect America Fund, which is sometimes referred to as the High Cost program. And that program is tasked with helping wire communities that are either rural, tribal, just difficult to reach, making sure that they have broadband accessibility. The E-Rate Schools and Libraries program, which is pretty self-explanatory, helping schools and libraries get access to connectivity services, primarily broadband. The Lifeline program, which we're here to talk about today, which is our most directly consumer-facing program, where we support low-income individuals so that they are able to access both phone and, since December 2nd, broadband services. And finally, our rural healthcare program, which again helps connect rural healthcare clinics and other entities and helps them have the connectivity services so that they can really do their job even when sometimes they don't have those professionals on board on board on site. So for example, having people who can read x-rays remotely or help with diagnosis remotely. So those are our programs, but today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Lifeline, which is our next slide. And the Lifeline program has actually been around since 1985. So I think one of the common terms you'll hear now is Obama phone, but if we're being totally honest, Lifeline is really Reagan phone, and it is a monthly discount on phone and, for the past week, broadband service. It's a $9.25 discount for most consumers, although there is a benefit for people living on tribal lands for up to $25 additional, bringing that total benefit to $34.25. And it is aimed at low-income consumers, so subscribers do prove their eligibility by participating in a qualifying program or demonstrating their income is at or below 135% of the federal poverty guideline. We're in 56 states and territories, so it's available across the country in our territories, commonwealths, and on tribal lands. And right now, 13 million U.S. households participate in the Lifeline program, which is about a third the eligible people in the country. So just a couple highlights of the program rules. Again, it's only available to subscribers who can document their eligibility. Only one Lifeline benefit is permitted per household, so that can get a little bit challenging, and I can talk to you about some more specifics if you have questions. But essentially, if you are an independent economic household, you can only get one Lifeline benefit. So for example, a husband and a wife living together would not be eligible to get multiple benefits. And every year, subscribers have to recertify their eligibility. So this isn't a sign up once and you get the benefit forever. You do have to recertify your eligibility. But we've made some changes to the eligibility program, so I'm going to turn it over to Olivia to talk a bit about that, the new programs.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jamie. And thanks, everyone, for plugging in to learn more about Lifeline. So as was mentioned, this order was modernized. And what we mean by modernized is that the Lifeline support can now cover voice, broadband, or a bundle of voice and broadband. So there are three buckets, if you want, of types of services that this 925 can go towards. The order, we call it a modernization order. It enhanced program integrity as well. There's three main steps when somebody is applying to be eligible for Lifeline. Two of these three steps are already centralized and handled by USAC. And the third is sort of the slide on the screen with going back one, the SNAP and the HUD. We will talk about this. This is new to and a little bit different than the older Lifeline program. So as I mentioned, there are three checks when somebody applies for Lifeline. There's an identity validation check, which is automated right now and handled by USAC. There's a duplications check for the one per household rule. These two things happen instantaneously. And right now most people apply through their carrier. So the carrier checks the USAC NLAD database, National Lifeline Accountability Database, for the identity, for the duplicates check, but then there's an identity validation run as well. If you clear that, the third check is the eligibility determination. As I mentioned, most people go through their carrier to apply for Lifeline. That means they either, the carrier will either check an existing database for SNAP or, you know, if they can, SSI, or, you know, potentially any of the other screens up above if those are available. If not, then they must look at sort of documentation and then document that they've reviewed the documentation. So carriers handle it. This modernization order takes that responsibility and centralizes it. So it will become a centralized check by USAC as well. This eligibility determination process is designed to be more streamlined, more automated, and definitely tighter because USAC is in all of the 50 states working with the SNAP provider, the HUD, public housing agency, the SSI, Medicaid, Veterans Affairs, trying to get agreements to ping the database for a yes/no. So in essence, when somebody applies for Lifeline, what will happen under this new framework is that those 3 checks, identity validation, duplicates check, and eligibility determination, could happen fairly instantaneously. This is something that needs to be built, so we are looking at a phased-in transition to that type of model. Also, the National Verifier, the centralization and creating of this centralized process will allow for more ways for the consumer to apply for Lifeline. They can still apply through the carrier, or they could apply directly to USAC. Or, and this is where I hope the conversation goes after this brief introduction, they can apply as part of a group using an aggregator. And the new national verification process is being thoughtfully designed so that it can accommodate batch uploads. So that if you, for example, are an aggregator and you're aggregating residents in a public housing supported building, you can batch upload all of their applications at the same time and deal with their certification in batches. But there are other ways, there are other benefits, potential benefits to the aggregation model, which I hope we'll talk about. And then another thing that came with the modernization order that's different than the existing Lifeline program there's additional value, consumer protections. Minimum standards are now part of the Lifeline program for voice and for broadband, and those will increase with time, so they ratchet up. If a wireless Lifeline provider also provides devices, which are not subsidized by the 925, but if it's part of their package of service, it must be a Wi-Fi enabled device, and at least one of those devices must be hotspot enabled, and the percentage of devices with hotspot capability will increase with time as well. So that, in a nutshell, is sort of how eligibility and what programs qualify and how you will go through the eligibility determination is going to change. There are programs that got dropped off the list. So for example, LIHEAP, the Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program, used to qualify you automatically. That list was sort of thinned out, and a lot of it was designed towards this automation capability. So ones with robust databases that can be pinged sort of made the cut. The Veterans Pension and Survivorship benefit is a new eligibility criteria. Right now, we know that veterans do participate in the Lifeline program, but we're hoping that by making it easier for them, by using the Pensions and Survivorship program, we can definitely, reach them better and serve them better. So I think, unless there are other questions, I'm going to hand it back to Jamie to talk about how Lifeline works as a program, how this benefit applies to the different services.
Great. Yes, I think we have not seen any questions yet, so we can spend another, I think, 5-10 minutes going over the presentation to get everyone on the same page before we go into the discussion format. So please go ahead, Jamie.
Great, thank you. So as we mentioned, the Lifeline benefit is $9.25 for most customers, and that benefit is paid directly to the service provider each month, so that many customers actually don't see a bill at all. So for example, if you have a prepaid wireless program, unless you go over your allotted minutes, you may never see a bill. But for customers who do have who do get a monthly bill, they'll see that discount each month directly on that bill. And as Olivia mentioned, the program is now available to broadband, so as of December 2nd. So you can still use it for fixed voice, which is your home phone. You can use it for mobile phone. You can use it for fixed broadband, so home broadband service, as well as mobile broadband. But you can also use it for bundled voice and broadband. So for example, if you had a smartphone that had data capabilities, but that you could also use as a telephone, subscribers can apply their benefit to that service as well. And the hope is really not to, I mean, we want to make sure that more and more people are having access to broadband services, but the goal is really, when possible, to keep people on sort of a bundled plan so that they are able to still have that phone service, but also add in broadband, because we know it's so important in terms of helping children do their homework, in terms of people being able to search for and keep their jobs, in terms of accessing services, just in terms of sort of interacting with society around you. Right now, broadband is not a luxury, it's a necessity. So those are the programs that are now available. And again, this just began on December 2nd. So one thing that I will caution you is that if you're talking to broadband providers in your community, especially some of the bigger broadband providers, they may not be fully up and running yet in terms of offering broadband services. But the hope is that over the next month to 6 months, that we will really see a lot more broadband providers coming into the program. So any service provider that was previously offering phone service through Lifeline was required to offer broadband service unless they asked the FCC for forbearance from that obligation. So our hope is that customers, again, will start to have a lot of broadband options and to be able to do some sort of comparison shopping and really figure out what program is going to work best for them. So I'm going to hand it back to Olivia. She's going to talk a bit about participation in the Lifeline program, and then we will open it up for some questions.
Hi. And this is going to be very quick. It's just a picture's worth 1,000 words. Here is a map of right now a reflection of the Voice Lifeline program. So the pre-modernization Lifeline program looks like this. You'll notice that Oklahoma has a very high penetration rate, and that could be a function of the tribal areas eligible for that enhanced Lifeline that Jamie had mentioned in the beginning. So you can see the states where uptake is better, and states where the program doesn't have as much, hasn't penetrated as deeply into the eligible population. The next slide.
Olivia,
yes.
Can I just jump in for a second? This is a map that's based on the number of people that are participating versus the number of people that are eligible to participate. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. I want to make sure it wasn't based on the cost or just the overall number of people, but it's the percentage of people who are eligible to participating.
Correct. And the way the Lifeline program is structured, theoretically, every eligible household can receive the benefit. So, in the advocacy community, we really hope that we can see more of this map turn bluer, like with a deeper penetration rate. We are looking for ways to make it easier for people to find out about the Lifeline program and to enroll.
Great, thanks for letting me jump in.
And then the next slide, really quickly, is just to show, as related to that prior slide, the qualifying programs. The pie chart shows what programs Lifeline participants had used to enroll in Lifeline. So you can see SNAP is very popular, as well as Medicaid. Like veterans benefits would not show up because that's a brand new program. And then, so the text to the left, if we were to just target SNAP and Medicaid populations, we would capture over 3/4 of the eligible Lifeline households. But we have an array of qualifying programs for a reason, and that is because not everybody who's eligible for SNAP will sign up for SNAP. So, and we acknowledge that, and we're trying to keep it as flexible as possible and create as many entry points into the program as possible.
So, and Olivia, can I jump in on one thing on that as well? And just to be really clear, this is how people actually signed up for the program. So a lot of those people who are in sort of the income or the SSI and other programs category may actually be eligible for SNAP and LIHEAP based on our research, but that's just not how they chose to demonstrate their eligibility when they came into the program.
Exactly, and it may be a function of like where that outreach occurred to notify the person or educate the consumer about Lifeline. So it may have been like more coordinated outreach, for example, with SSI. I mean Medicaid.
So, Olivia, was that the end then?
Yes, that is it for the sort of overview slides. And if folks wanted to, we could sort of do a deep dive into like how you know, we can look at this new landscape and where some of the opportunities are, given that as of December 2nd, broadband is eligible to be a covered service.
Right. I want to note that we already have one question that's already been answered in the chat. Jamie, let me just ask you to let people know who may not be in the chat. The question was that asking if there are materials already available that can be put on city websites and social media that local governments can promote the program and the rules and awareness of it. And what's the answer to that?
Absolutely. We have some actually brand new consumer-facing materials with all of the December 2nd changes reflected. So I will share those with the team at Next Century Cities so that they can share those out to you. And you can also, if you're interested, link to our consumer website, which is lifelinesupport.org, and that has, again, an array of information for customers who are looking to sign up for the program, and it's being pretty constantly updated as well. There's, with all the changes in the program, we're sort of continuing to see new needs for information, and if you see information that is not located there that you think would be useful, please let us know and we'll add it. Again, it's lifelinesupport.org.
And Olivia, is there anything else that people might want to look at for materials to rapidly make this program, make people aware of the program?
What we in the Lifeline advocacy community are trying to develop in the interim, USAC will be developing this. It will be consumer facing, but is more of like a comparison tool. So the FCC has approved now 4 broadband Lifeline providers. They are operational. I mean, there is a current ETCs, I should say, are also still able to offer a broadband product. They don't have to go through anything special. So we are trying to figure out.
Sorry, and ETCs is those are the eligible telecommunication carriers that are set by states, basically.
Correct. The Lifeline broadband provider is determined by the FCC, but the state-determined eligible carriers are also able to provide Lifeline broadband. And so we're trying to find a way to help figure out what those products are, who's in the marketplace, so that a consumer can know what their choices are and the array of Lifeline products to choose from. One thing to note also, though, in this new order, there's something called a benefits port freeze. If you pick a regular voice Lifeline product, you are not able to change service providers for 60 days. After 60 days, you can choose another one if you're not happy with the one you chose. If with the Lifeline broadband product, that benefits port freeze is 1 year. The reason why that is to try and be able to create some more incentives for broadband providers to invest in Lifeline, to realize that there's not going to be a lot of churn, so that they can put in even more robust products than the minimum standards, hopefully, knowing that they will have that customer for a year. It will be a relationship.
So I want to turn to what we can do as local leaders, as representatives of local government, to make sure that this new program, the new rules, are successful.
I think one is the modernization order, the creation of this national verifier, how eligibility determinations will change over the next 3 years. It's sort of going to roll out in the states. 5 states, at least 5 states by the end of 2017, half the states by the end of 2018, and all the states in 3 years. So depending on where you live, the process for how you enroll may be a little different. So I think it would be good to, hopefully we can post on Next Century Cities, like, as things sort of roll into place, sort of the state of play, so that you'll know which processes will apply in your particular state. There is also a little bit of nuance as to the eligibility criteria. I think there are a handful of states, well, about 8 states, that got an extension to use some state Lifeline eligibility criteria. So they have a little bit longer to sync their eligibility criteria with the new streamlined eligibility criteria. So you may see in some states your old program rules are still in play for a little bit longer in 2017 before they phase out. So I can hand over charts, and hopefully we can get this information out so folks know, if you're in one of those states, that it's a little bit different. So I guess the key thing to keep in mind is that it's a transition and that it's phased in. So, we can certainly help you as a resource if you just tell us like where you're based, sort of which rules and sort of which timelines you're falling under as you prepare your materials.
Great. Jamie, what thoughts do you have in terms of what local governments can do to make this a success?
Sure. I would say there are sort of 3 main things from my perspective. And the first, as Olivia mentioned, is that states are starting to participate in the National Verifier, and we have been talking to people literally from all 56 states and territories at this point. But when you have the opportunity to really encourage your state PUC, your Health and Human Services divisions to sort of get on board with the National Verifier and to participate, that would be wonderful. I think hearing how important it is from the city perspective is the first thing. The second thing is this is a program that a lot of even social service professionals don't know a whole lot about. So I think just sharing information, making it available on your website, making sure that it's something that people living in your cities know is available to them is really important. Right now, as Olivia said, there is a little bit of differentiation between sort of how you sign up in different cities. You do have to actually go to the service providers to do the eligibility verification, but as National Verifier rolls in, that will be easier because customers can go either directly to a service provider or they can go through the National Verifier themselves. And the third, and I think this sort of answers a question that I saw from Kamla, is to really encourage, when you're working with service providers in your community, to really encourage them to get on board and to offer Lifeline services. Again, almost no service provider is required to participate, which there's some back end, if they receive money from other USAC services, they may be required to. But it really is a choice for the service providers to participate. So making it clear how important it is to have the service available to your low-income communities and to really encourage them to get on board is very important. And we are streamlining processes on our ends to make it easier for example, the the Verizons and the Sprints and the big companies in the world to participate. We're really working with them to help them be both compliant, but also to make sure that that is not a big back-end challenge for them, because we do understand that those are the people who are often able to service, particularly in urban areas. They already have the footprint there, so we want to make sure they're part of the program.
We've got a lot of really good questions coming in. Go ahead, Olivia.
Yeah, and in response, to build on that, and in response to one of the questions about new ISPs joining into the Lifeline program. So this modernization order also created that streamlined process for ISPs to enter, and they can do it in a very controlled way. It's sort of an expedited process, a streamlined process. You just need to prove that you've been in business for a while and that you've provided certain services, voice, broadband, for a period of time, and then you meet the standard criteria, like you can be functional in an emergency situation. There is somebody at the FCC that we can hook people up with who can walk them through, but for new ISPs, they would go through the FCC process for applying as opposed to going to the states, and they are trying to make it as streamlined as possible. With that is an opportunity as well. One of the approved Lifeline broadband providers is offering service in one zip code in New York City because it has a partnership with a public housing authority, a very large one within that footprint. And what they will be offering is fixed wireless broadband with speeds 20 up, 20 down, no usage limits. The price is $9.75 a month. I think it's 5 connections per unit. So basically, they've exceeded the minimum standards. So this is sort of what I was alluding to, like where there may be opportunities within your communities. If you can think of like aggregation possibly as a tool to leverage a steady stream of $9.25 per eligible Lifeline household. If you have some relationship with a large pool of similarly situated people to perhaps negotiate with a provider. Perhaps it's an ISP, sort of heard a little bit about Lifeline, not quite sure what it is. You have to be an ETC, an eligible telecommunications carrier, to receive these federal funds. So you must go through this process to be part of this Lifeline program. But what you can create is this structure. Like if you're wire up a building, this could help part of the planning of how you will maintain that service, because it would be a steady stream, $9.25 per month per Lifeline eligible household. The aggregation process will allow that sort of aggregator entity to batch upload those applications within this national verifier process. So they're also working to help streamline and make the administration of that aggregation easier. But it is a possibility, the potential, again, of dealing with the revenue part of the question when you're designing broadband adoption programs.
Just a question about the aggregate program. If you have, a housing that has 10 families, is there like a minimum that one would go through to aggregate in that sort of a situation that you can give any guidance on?
Well, the Lifeline modernization order does not go into any great detail about spelling out, just what aggregation looks like. I think there's going to be a practical answer to that question depending on how the national verifier is set up. Like if they're going to have like a minimum batch amount just for their batch processes. But again, and we can provide the link. The national verifier, the draft plan, has been filed with the FCC and is available for all stakeholders to review and comment on. And if there are cities out there that are very interested in aggregation, have some potential sort of aggregation models in mind, this would be a good place to sort of spell out those scenarios, because that could help with the design of what capabilities the National Verifier should have as it's being built. And this plan
Jamie,
is a living document.
Right. I just wanted to see if Jamie had any comments, but I wanted to remind people that we're going to see these rules being as we make it up as USAC learns how to implement these new rules, I guess.
Absolutely.
Yes,
oh, sorry,
keep going, Jamie. I was just going to say that the National Verifier plan is going to be updated every 6 months. I mean, there is this can improve.
So, and if you want to see to do that, the first is that you can go to USAC's website, and there's a link right there. But if you have comments or you just want to go sort of directly to the source, you can also go to LifelineNationalVerifier.org, and that you can both see the National Verifier draft plan, but that's also where you can leave comments as well. And I also just wanted to answer a question from William Ness, and we've heard actually from a lot of smaller organizations that the National Verifier is sort of a prerequisite for them being able to get on board in terms of being able to offer Lifeline service. Sort of the burden of eligibility checking is too much for a small organization. So in terms of sort of who you talk to, I would suggest talking to your state PUC is probably the first step for that, because each state is a little bit different in terms of sort of who owns the eligibility data. In some places, a lot of it can be reached through the state PUC. In some states, we actually have to work with HHS and sometimes also with sort of an offshoot of the Department of Ag for state, for their state SNAP information. But in every state, the PUC should be a good first step in terms of who you talk to sort of push them towards participating in the National Verifier and sort of push them towards being in one of the first waves as well.
Right, and just to be very clear, the PUC is the State Public Utility or Public Service Commission. States have different names for them, but it's pretty standard. And I think a lot of people that are working in this area are pretty familiar with that entity. If
Sorry,
not,
I'm talking in alphabet soup.
Well, and then I think one of the things is that we do our best to explain, but I really hope that people feel empowered if they're a little confused to also come back one-on-one and say, hey, we're trying to get a grip on this because, it's hard for all of us. I want to go back to one question that was earlier, and that's we've talked a bit about for cities that are thinking about doing their own programs and aggregating things like that, but do you have any recommendations for areas of the country in which we see a higher participation rate? Anything that cities should be doing just to make sure that people are aware of the options that are out there?
Right. The high participation rate is a reflection of the voice-only product because, as has been mentioned many times, the December 2nd was the date when broadband was, that deadline for broadband to be included as a supported service. So it is very, very new. I would also, so getting out there to let consumers know, hey, your Lifeline program, your Lifeline benefit can also go to support broadband or a bundle. So there should be more stuff out there. I did see the comments about Verizon and Sprint. I just wanted to note, even if a carrier said, you know what, we're going to forbear from the Lifeline broadband program right now, even if they say that, they can still, under the rules, provide a Lifeline broadband product and receive their $9.25. So it is worth that conversation. And I think it may be more compelling if you've got sort of an aggregation type of model in mind or something shy of, but can say I've got this population. Can we have a conversation about perhaps a Lifeline broadband product and hopefully one that exceeds minimum standards? And you've got all of these folks here who would be very, very interested. see if they'd be willing to come back at it, because they can do that. They don't have to file any paperwork. They're already in ETC.
Thanks, Olivia. Jamie, any other thoughts on what local governments could do to encourage participation in either the telecom or the broadband program?
Absolutely. I think really awareness is the biggest step. As you guys could see from those participation charts, only about a third of eligible people is the average across the country, and in some sort of states and municipalities that's significantly lower. And for the most part, what we hear is that people just don't know that this is a service that exists. So sort of in our experience talking to states and areas that have higher participation rates, it's often because either the state, city, or local government is really pushing participation, as well, letting people know that this benefit exists, or that there are some really sort of progressive or forward-thinking carriers who are letting people know about this opportunity. So all carriers have sort of an advertising requirement through the FCC, but you know, they certainly fulfill that advertising obligation in different ways. So working with, you know, especially if you have some good participating carriers in your city, there could be opportunities. For example, some carriers do things like sign-up events, or actually go into, for example, a housing project, and because, you know, everyone who lives in Section 8 or Section 9 housing is eligible, that's a great opportunity to really partner with those service providers, and it benefits everybody, because it benefits the customers who are getting access to that service and finding out about a benefit they might not know they're eligible for. But it also is, the service providers have an audience of sort of qualified applicants right there. So I think just really making sure people know the service is available and sort of breaking down barriers whenever possible to help them get enrolled.
And I want to turn back to Olivia for something that's you know, a little bit inappropriate for Jamie to address, given that she's working with USAC. But from the interests of the public interest community that, Olivia, you work with, I'm curious, with a new FCC, for people who weren't aware, the Lifeline rules were adopted with a 3-2 partisan majority. And some of the things that I think we saw Republican commissioners pushing for very hard might come back in future rulemaking. So, Olivia, is there any sense of what we might see in the future with regard to Lifeline?
Yes. So as I mentioned, right now, theoretically, every eligible household can receive the Lifeline support. One of the sticking points with some of the commissioners, the Republican commissioners, was they wanted to see a cap. And this was also something raised on the Hill. So we may see efforts again to cap the amount of the Lifeline benefits. So if it's level funding, as Jamie had mentioned, this is a program that is undersubscribed, substantially undersubscribed. That cap would be set very, very low. And if you look at sort of the maps that are darker blue and lighter blue, in terms of penetration rate, you know, if you set a cap, then it makes it harder for those other states to, you know, have greater success with their outreach efforts. So it's one of those things that we need to be very, very aware of. Another line of attack with the Lifeline program, and this was more on the Hill, were bills to limit Lifeline support to voice only, to not allow it to support broadband. Now that it's been modernized, I don't know if that will reappear, but I just wanted to put it on your radar screen.
And Olivia, how might we anticipate a cap to impact the program? Is that something where certainly fewer people would then have access to it, but would it be waiting lists? Would it be sort of a day like back when we were registering for college courses, where you just try to get in line early, or how might it be administered?
You know, I haven't seen any, and when this was proposed, we didn't see any proposals on how it would work. but it does imply that there will be a lot of administration of that rule because it will be rationing the benefit, and there will be winners and losers. And it's sort of hard to take something away from somebody who's already got the benefit. So I think a likely scenario is that those who are current Lifeline subscribers, you know, probably unless they fall off, will still have their Lifeline, but the door may shut for those now wanting the Lifeline broadband product, trying to step in if they haven't been a Lifeline subscriber. So it's very frustrating. I think it's a premature sort of proposal, and it's based on things like fraud, waste, and abuse concerns. But as I had mentioned, this Lifeline order addresses a structural integrity issue, and that's the creation of the national verifier. Eligible people will be checked by pinging the database, the SNAP database, the Medicaid databases, the public housing databases. If they're enrolled in those programs, there is an instantaneous way to check that they're eligible. It'll also help with the annual recertification process to make it more efficient, but it also makes it more secure. So it's being built in. They should just let it roll out.
We'll bring this back in a second to wrap up, but just one last question regarding a potential cap. Is there any sense of how a cap would work? I mean, I understand if you have a bunch of individuals getting it, but with the aggregate, the aggregate opportunity, do you have any sense of whether that would be threatened, or if they would find a way to incorporate that? I guess a different way of asking it is, and you're working with Republicans, were the two Republican commissioners supportive of the aggregate approach?
I don't think aggregation was on their radar screen, like the potential good it could do. I don't think even as a mechanism they were even thinking of that. So it could be an argument we bring back to fight against a cap. Because this is one way, like if you are, renovating affordable housing and you're building in broadband capability, right? This is one way to keep that sustainable. Why would you want to jeopardize that?
Right. Now I'm sorry, was someone jumping? Oh, no. Sorry, I think Olivia's having a problem with the pet. Jamie, let me. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I must have misheard, but Jamie, let me just give you a chance to wrap up. We have a few minutes left. If anyone has any questions, we can still deal with them. But I have no doubt there may be a new point you'd like to raise or something you'd like to reinforce based on all the previous conversation throughout the last 45 minutes.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that the biggest thing that I would love for cities to understand is that there are a lot of ways to sort of get your residents involved in the Lifeline program. So from the individual level, helping them, understand that they're eligible for the program and getting them signed up, encouraging your state to participate in the national verifier and sort of pushing them to be in the early waves of states, and also looking at those aggregation opportunities. As Olivia has talked to, the order was written, we think, somewhat intentionally broadly. So there had been a lot of interest from the sort of the housing project side after January. But I think there are a lot of opportunities. One of the things written in the order is also looking at sort of non-cost related barriers to people having access to broadband. So looking at ways that we can work with some of our public space, and that's where people are going to get their broadband access, and having information at those places is a really great way to let people know that they do have this opportunity moving forward. So I think just the thing I would hope people would walk the Lifeline program, and that we are really excited and open to working with you to figure out the best way to get your residents involved.
In both Jamie and Olivia, I'd like to put to you a final question or point that I'd like you to riff on, and that's that just as there's many ways to support Lifeline, Lifeline is one of several tools. I know that was something you wanted to make sure people didn't have a sense that we didn't expect Lifeline to solve all of these problems. So if you have any comments along those lines, I think that'd be a great way to end the discussion. Go ahead, Olivia.
Absolutely understand the limitations of the reach of Lifeline, and that it is a modest $9.25 benefits. We are very aware that there are other low-income products as a result of merger conditions, but when those merger conditions expire, perhaps with the national verifier, they may want to also take advantage of the Lifeline structure, administrative structure. But we would like for there to be a competitive marketplace. We do not want to race to the bottom. So we're very mindful of the importance of when consumers are being told about the different types of products out there, it's Lifeline as well as any other low-cost item out there that is of quality. And again, there are minimum standards built into Lifeline that will ratchet up with time. So that is part of the design, that it not be stagnant.
Excellent. And Jamie, any thoughts?
So the other piece I'd like to add on to that is, we do know, we have been talking to a lot of the groups out there. We know that Comcast has a low-income product. Cox has their Connect to Compete product, and while those carriers will have the option whether or not they both participate in Lifeline and make those products eligible for Lifeline, the other thing to keep in mind is that for residents who may be receiving one of those services and maybe using, sort of those sub $20 services, that if they're not applying their Lifeline benefit to that broadband option, that they can still be using it for their phone service. So if they, for example, have a separate cell phone that they're using, and then they also have one of those low-cost broadband options, they are eligible to have multiple sort of products coming in as long as they're only applying to Lifeline to one of them. So really making sure that people have sort of a robust connectivity experience is important, even though we are only able to pay for one portion of that.
Well, thank you. This has been great. I want to hand it back over to Deb. We're a little bit early. Deb may have a question to end us out, but otherwise we can let people go a little early.
Thanks, Chris, and thanks to everybody for joining the call. It's a lot to take in, and so if folks on the call have questions about this or specific questions to what's going on in your community, please feel free to reach out to us. If we don't know the answer, we will find a person who does. So as it seems like a lot of these things are still in flux, we haven't gotten all the answers yet, and that's accurate. So we need to continue to help to keep each other informed, and so we will work on doing that. In that same vein, we do have a new blog on our site as of this morning. It's right on the homepage. Feel free to take a look at it. It's got a lot of information. It may help to explain this, the process as well. So to close out the day, I'm going to thank Chris for moderating, and thank you, Chris and Jamie, for sharing your wisdom. And I look forward to...
Olivia and Jamie, yeah. You said a little misspoke, but we all know who you meant.
I didn't say Olivia. I apologize. I actually wrote it down, so shame on me. But please don't hesitate to reach out to me at deb@nextcenturycities.org if I can help. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
I think.